Okay, imagine working hard all your life, maybe raising a family, but you're able to buy a home and you actually pay that home off in time to retire. And now you're retired and you have your pension and maybe some savings or social security. But by the time you're 65, 70, even 80, you end up losing the home because you cannot keep up with the rising cost of the taxes, the insurance, the maintenance, because all these things are going to continue to rise while our pensions and social security only rise at a minuscule amount. Definitely not enough to keep up with inflation. Well, this is what's happening. And according to the statistics that I could find, about 1.5 million people become homeless each year. They get evicted, they lose their homes. And 30% of those are people 65 and older. Now, when you're younger, 20, 30, 40, you can feasibly recoup from something like that. You know, you're still able to work, you have an opportunity to save some money, rebuild your credit score, whatever you need to do. The chances of that happening when you're over 65 are slim to none. And if you've lost your home, chances are you don't have a savings. Otherwise, you probably would have been able to keep your home. So now you're homeless. And if you couldn't afford the taxes, insurance, and maintenance, how are you supposed to afford rent somewhere else? From other statistics that I've read, the fastest growing demographic of homeless are people 65 and older. So that's what's happening. Earlier last week, I did a video on my thoughts about possibly losing our home at some point in time. I'm concerned because, things are going up, the taxes, the insurance, especially out here in California. And even with the paid for house and a savings, eventually the money's going to run out. We might outlive our savings. We're healthy, we're strong. We could live another 20, 30 years. I doubt our savings is going to last that long. And my biggest concern was that we wouldn't be able to afford to keep up with the maintenance. And we would have to consider selling. So I decided to do some research because I was curious, what the statistics are for people that are going through this. And it's concerning. A lot of older people, 65 and older, are experiencing this right now. They're having to deal with this. And with rents the way they are, because a lot of people are saying, well, just sell your house and rent. Well, you guys all know how expensive rent is. That's not even a feasible option anymore. I was thinking if I was in a position to where I had drained my savings and I was using my savings to supplement my pension or social security each month just to pay for the taxes and insurance and all, life bills, things like that. Once that's gone, and I know I'm not going to have that, I would definitely look into selling the house. I wouldn't wait until we lost it. You get so, because you can only get, like 3 months behind or something, and then they can foreclose on your house. So you would have to do this beforehand because otherwise you lose all your equity, everything. And it's a scary thought. Nobody wants to be in that position, especially like I said, if you worked hard, you paid for your house, you're thinking that's, the golden egg, when you retire, you're going to be good because you've got a paid for house. But because of all these other expenses, it's not free. You're still going to pay. So you need to look into other options ahead of time. Don't wait until, it's too late. When I made my post, several people commented about reverse mortgages. Well, I don't know a lot about them, but just from the comments that I was reading, it kind of put me off. I was nervous. I don't know if I would do that. And according to the studies that I was reading, that's one of the reasons a lot of elderly people lose their house because of reverse mortgage scams. So you need to be careful, do your research on that if you're going to choose that option. Yeah, it's not for people that plan on living another 20, 30 years. That's for sure. Yeah, right now, the biggest problem that we're having is, like I said, you could sell your house and now you have, I don't know how much equity, you have. You may have enough to buy a smaller piece of property, but there again, you're still going to have taxes, insurance, and maintenance. A lot of people are on lists to get into affordable senior housing. Unfortunately, it could be years. And in that period of time, you could find yourself in financial problems. You know, you could lose the house before that even happened. So you would consider selling the house and maybe renting something very small while you're waiting, possibly moving in with family. Another option that was suggested, and I went along with this one, is getting a roommate. Although a lot of people are dead against it, and that's fine. Like I said, it's just a personal choice. But you might consider renting out one of your rooms to a family friend. Even then, I know risk can occur with anything you do in life. You know, you have to weigh it out for yourself if that looks like something that would be possible or um, helpful in any way. So that would be one of my first choices. I would probably consider renting out one of my rooms to help me. But according to the studies that I read, not only, you know, are there these reverse mortgage scams, but there's medical and hospitalization bills that occur as we get older. As we know, you know, our health deteriorates and unexpected things like this happen. And the next thing you know, you're getting a lien on your house, which forces you to sell. You know, these things that happen aren't expected. That's why it's an issue. You know, if we could see into the future and know what's going to happen, then we could make, you know, proper choices, you know, ahead of time. But you don't always know. These things just happen, and you have to be prepared as best as you can. But how do you prepare for the unexpected? You know, like I said, if you do have a savings, don't wait until it's completely depleted before you make a change. You know, if you see that things are going downhill, sit down, figure it out. Well, I have this much I'm using out of my bank account each month to supplement my income, and I only have this much money in the bank, so it's only going to last me another year or two. If you know that ahead of time, then now's the time to make some changes, to consider putting your house up for sale. And you might have to consider moving to a different state. That's something I'm dead set against myself because my kids and my grandkids are here. I talk about that ad nauseum, but that may be your only choice. That may be our only choice. If we were to, let's say, sell our house here and we got enough equity that we could not only pay cash for a house in another state, we could also have a nest egg after, you know, after we purchase the house. You know, we might not have a choice. Even now, if we were to sell the house and it's paid for and we got all that money back, it's still not enough to buy. It would be silly for us to buy. Let's put it that way. It would be silly for us to buy another home, even if it was smaller, because, you know, you guys know, I tell you all the time, we live in a California bungalow. It's 1,700 square feet. They don't make houses too much smaller anymore. I could probably find a 2 bedroom, but they're rare. They're hard to come by, and they're not much cheaper, to be honest with you. So, you know, I don't even know if that's a consideration. Um, Maybe a mobile home. You know, people live in modular homes and stuff. Um, that's just something you really have to weigh out the pros and cons, because if you move into an older park, which is obviously more affordable, you have to worry about your mobile home aging out, and you have to leave, you know, and now you've got nowhere to go. You know, you have to buy a piece of property. um, you could look into renting an apartment, but like I said, apartments are so ridiculously expensive these days. I'm sure it would be more expensive. It would be more expensive than maintenance, taxes, and insurance are in a house. And if you've already couldn't afford that, the chances of you being able to afford rent on even a small apartment is going to be hard, right? And if you don't have a savings, I'm assuming if you lost your house at this point, you probably depleted your savings. So the only money that you have probably is left in your house, the equity in your house, and you're going to need that. And you need to figure out how much of that you're going to need to get into another place, and how much you're going to need to supplement your income. So yeah, if you are going down that path and you are slowly depleting your savings, and you can pretty much see that this is what's going to happen, don't wait until the last minute. Don't wait till it's too late. If you know ahead of time that your money's going to be gone if you use it to supplement your monthly social security or pension, now's the time. Now's the time to look into other options. I watched a YouTube channel. There was this lady, I think she was in her 70s. She ended up selling her house because that's where she was at. She had depleted her savings. She could no longer afford the monthly, taxes, insurance, and maintenance. And she was able, she was still paying the mortgage too. It wasn't a lot. She had a pretty low mortgage, but still, she ended up selling it. So her house wasn't completely paid off, but she was able to get enough that she bought a very nice RV, which, we've talked about many, many times, and is something that we've even considered. The only problem that I have with that is, what's the end game? You can't stay out on the road forever, right? And let's say you're only in your late 60s or 70s. You could live another 20, 30 years. Are you going to want to live in an RV for the next 20, 30 years? you know um some people that I see, I'm sure you guys watch the same channels I do. A lot of people do this for a period of time, maybe a couple years, and then they're able to buy a piece of property, and then they put some kind of dwelling on it. And that's a possibility. That's something to look into. But you've got to think ahead of of what's going to happen after. As something could happen within the first year. Health issues, we're older, these things just happen. Nobody plans on it, but you have to think about the what ifs. And if you have family or kids, you're fortunate, because chances are you could move in with one of them, but not everybody has that option. So, you need to really sit down, write it all out on paper. What are your options? Even the ones that you normally wouldn't consider. You could get on a list for affordable senior housing, but more and more of those are closing down. There's less of them and more people needing them. So the competition is great. Like I said, you could consider getting a roommate. I know it's not for everybody, but for some people, it may be their only option. Um, I don't know. There's even the assisted living programs that people are waiting to get into. A lot of those are very expensive. Would you be able to afford those even if you sold your house and you had, X amount of dollars in savings? How long would you be able to stay in one of those? Some of them are 10,000 a month. So, you really need to write it out, write down the numbers, know ahead of time what you're looking at. Um, but still, surprises can occur. Nobody plans on the unexpected, but things are going to happen, and all you can do is prepare the best you can, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Yeah, something like that. So, but that's where I'm at. These are things that I need to look into now, because I'm not getting younger, but and things aren't getting cheaper. Everything seems to be, continuing to rise, and I'm sure they will continue going up, except for, pensions and social security, and that those will not continue to rise. They've already talked about having to cut back on social security, not do away with it entirely, but more than likely they are going to have to cut it back. If you're having a tough time living on a certain amount now, can you imagine if they cut it back even by $100 a month? For some people, that's the difference in being homeless. I've known people that $40 would really throw them off budget. So, I mean, I don't want to be a fearmonger. I just want to be a realist, and I want to prepare as the best that we can, and just know your options. That's all I'm saying. So do some research and see what you can come up with. If you guys have any ideas, I always love hearing from you, because, a lot of you guys have some great ideas, and far better than me, because I'm not financially savvy. I'm learning, because I've had to in my old age, and I'm trying to figure these things out. So I'm always open to suggestions. Yeah, I appreciate hearing from you guys. So leave me a comment, let me know what you think, and I will see you in the next video.